This video provides a visual guide to the information on project documentation provided on the TED Ecosystem Confluence site. The information provided here aims to help contractors understand what documentation is required for a project. It explains the documentation creation process, tracks milestones and changes, and provides style and quality guidelines. All of these will help you understand the requirements and scope of the documentation that you'll be providing as part of a contract. Starting on the TED Confluence site homepage, also called the TED Ecosystem homepage, you'll see a grid of all the TED projects. In the left-hand menu, you'll see a list of topics. One of these topics is documentation management, or docs management, and you can find out what documentation needs to be produced and the quality factors and style guides that you can refer to while creating the documentation. The subtopics are understanding and tracking documentation processes, elements and style guides, links and resources for documentation production, and any project-specific information where there are some extra pieces of information just for that project. On the first page, Understanding and Tracking Documentation, you have the overview. Start by reading through this first and then go on to the subtopics. You can go on to the Documentation Operations Process Overview, which will show the phase of setting up a documentation project. This is mostly completed by the OP Project Manager or Technical Communicator and consists of project-related information that you will need to know, like basic information and who the audiences are. This information will be filled out in several tables or spreadsheets. The Audiences page describes the concept of different audiences that you may need to write for. So potentially there will not just be one version of a particular topic, there may be several, each of which directed at a different audience. These could be lay people, business people, data reusers, or developers. Each of these will need the information at a different technical level, for a different purpose, in a different tone, and with varying content, as best matches their prior knowledge and purpose. Therefore, different approaches for the same piece of information are required. The project detail contains information about the project overall, for example, project name, the description, the project number, the docs repository and branch that you'll be working on, and the documentation scope and requirements. Then there's a list of planned milestones, deliverables, and dates for the documentation, and at which points there will be a review and a sign-off for the milestone deliverable. The Quality Guidelines page lists the audiences you are required to write for, as defined by the project manager. This may be decided in a discussion with you, the contractor. This table should be duplicated for each audience defined. Secondly, the Quality Guidelines list some quality elements and assigned elements per audience that both parties can use as a guide to produce and check that the documentation meets the quality requirements. The project manager will define these globally and/or per audience, and the contractor can refer to these when writing or preparing for a milestone check. The project manager or other team members can add notes and comments. This is an iterative process whereby things will be improved and then finally accepted. The project tracking page defines the milestones and whether and when they were delivered. It contains a signature, and these could coincide with the payment date, which is very useful and provides all the information to make sure that the target is finished correctly as requested and that this section is ready for payment. Also, it records whether requirements have changed in agreement since the first request. The publication page describes the documentation publication process and which of the actors in the project do what. The next part of the documentation information will inform you where the doc's raw file locations are, the repository structure, some indications of page structure and style guide. These are for your own information. You can read through these pages before embarking on a documentation project to get an idea of the process, what's expected overall, and you can use the guidelines provided to check quality and appropriateness for the defined audiences. Completed requirements and tracking sheets and tables will be stored in a SharePoint folder and shared with all project members for each distinct project.